Today on Locked On Red Wings, who's going to be a good fit to fill in this Red Wings forward core? Could you see a Nazem Kadri, or will they go with a more temporary replacement like a Calle Jarnkrok or a Mattias Janmark?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty is host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And I'm a producer over at 97.1 The Ticket. And today, Scotty, well, first, don't want to get ahead of myself. Today's episode is brought to you guys by BetOnline. The webpage is frozen. Here we go. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, if you guys didn't notice, which you probably did, we did not have a Monday episode. Sunday was Father's Day. We always record a day before. That's your explanation. We were just, celebrating Father's Day. It was a busy day for all of us.
Yes.
There we go. Tuesday edition.
Yes.
I love your input there. Yes. We're going to be talking about the free agents on the forward side of things. Now, this is with every conversation we do, when we break down goalies, defense, forward, with whatever it is, forward is always the one we go to last because forward's always the deepest. We started it on Friday's episode when we talked about Johnny Gaudreau because he kind of deserved his own episode, having a 115-point season with Calgary Flames. It's looking like he might not re-sign with Calgary just because of the fact, how's an extension not done yet? I know, obviously, Steven Stamkos a couple years ago waited until a day before free agency to sign his extension. But so that was a conversation that was had, and Scotty and we disagreed a little bit on whether or not they should sign him, but overall, we were kind of on the same train of thought.
It's like in math class when two people both get the right answer, but their work is different, so one person gets more points than the other.
Yeah. One of us showed our work better, and it was me, and so I got full marks. You got 2 points.
You know what? I was gonna say it was me before you did, so I respect you getting there first.
I know where your mind's headed most of the time nowadays.
It's fair.
Today though, there's a lot of forwards to talk about, and I guess we should get right into it so we don't waste any time. There's 3 forwards outside of Gaudreau that I feel like we need to at least touch on. The Red Wings center depth is what screams the most. And there's a lot of wingers out there. And something that Max Boltman mentioned on our episode with him is that there's always a lot of really good wingers in the free agent pool. It's always centers that you struggle to find. And there's actually a couple of pretty solid centers that you could go after. And namely, the guy you want to go after, if you're legitimately trying to take a leap in this offseason, is Nasam Kadri. And I know that's a little bit of some people will agree with it. Some people won't, because Nazem Kadri is a little bit of a controversial player. Not because he's his off the ice stuff. There's no off the ice stuff. It's just on the ice. He has a target on his back, for better or for worse. Sometimes it's deserved for him. Sometimes it's not. But he is a highly productive player, especially lately. 87 points in 71 regular season games this year. He was on fire in the postseason before he got injured. Could return shortly. At 31 years old, he might not be, or probably will not be, returning to the Colorado Avalanche. You sign a guy like Nazem Kadri, who is looking to get his, big payday here. That immediately becomes your second line center on this Red Wings team, maybe even top line center, competing with Dylan Larkin for that top line spot. And it really does shore up one of the biggest weaknesses that the Red Wings have. The obvious downside is him in a contract year is playing out of his mind. And you're going to have him until his, late 30s if you're going to try and sign a guy like him.
Yeah, for sure. It's honestly, there's a lot of interesting names in the center market. I think center is alone a fascinating thing to look at. And I think there's quite a few options there depending on what direction you want to head, whether you want to do kind of the more Band-Aid guys, maybe have some dudes that could play for a future contract, but for kind of our expected only be here for a year or two. And then you have top end guys that you could sign to long term. And then you have people below that even that are more total shot in the dark guys. For the center is very obviously the position that the Detroit Red Wings depth wise need to address the most, just organizationally. And so the fact that there are so many fascinating options out there is makes it, well, fascinating.
Well, like Nazem Kadri, for instance, on the Colorado Avalanche, which Stanley Cup final, just blew out the Lightning 7-0 in Game 2. Game 3 is happening as we record, so by the
Well,
time
how are
you're
you feeling
listening to
about
this,
that?
the 7-0 beatdown.
How are you just feeling about the series?
Oh, it's been great. It's been so much fun. I
Who,
think it's really interesting to see Tampa actually legitimately struggle against the team.
Avs in 5, don't sleep.
It really feels that way, but the Lightning were down 2-0 against the Rangers in the last series and came back and won that in 6. So don't count the Lightning out yet.
Oh, I'm counting them out.
Okay. But the one, and see, like, it's the thing about Kadri is this team is looking to get better. The only one downside is just how much you're gonna have to spend to get him, how long you will have him. Cap space, the money I'm not really so worried about. It's just you're gonna have him until he's in his late 30s, and how much of a step forward would signing a guy like Kadri now when you do need center depth, because it isn't like you can, out of every guy we've talked about this entire little mini series, Nazem Kadri is probably the guy you could make the strongest argument for signing if this team is looking to make a step forward to winning, because you immediately shore up that center depth so much. And he is a guy that can bring that to the team. But it's just, are you willing to dedicate all this money to a player till his mid to late 30s? Do you think that your window, hopefully your window is open by the time he's out of his prime, but can he keep that production up as well?
For sure, and that's definitely the biggest question is length of contract for him. But there's also some, when looking at a lot of the like top end centers out there, like they are 4 or 5 years older in age than him too. So it's a fascinating, not that that pretty much takes up us out of the market for like Giroux, Malkin, Bergeron. You know what I mean? Like that Bergeron. That's pretty much like it, right? So
Yeah.
like that, they're too old, not in the sense that they're bad anymore or necessarily, but they're just too old for the Detroit Red Wings to really for it, that fit to make sense. Whereas he is he's right in that in between stage where you're like, okay, you could lock him up long term and hope that he's productive for 75% of that deal, or you lock him up for 2 to 3 years and just give him a lot of AAV and kind of hope that like, oh well, you have him for his whole peak, and then when he hits his mid 30s again, he'd be back on the market, I guess. But players aren't stupid, so like I'm sure he's looking for a longer term thing.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't think there's any way he takes less than less than 5 years at this point, because this is going to be, he's never been, and here's the other gamble with Nazem Kadri. He's been great this season, and it would, like I said, shore up that glaring weakness on the Red Wings. One of their two glaring weaknesses, center depth and defensive depth being the two glaring weaknesses. But he hasn't been, the Nazem Kadri we've seen this year is not the Nazem Kadri he's been his career. He's always been a half point per game, at best a 3/4 point per game player. This year he's exploded, and you wonder at 31 years old how much is him just finally becoming who he's always been, or how much of it is just the team he plays on. So that's the gamble you got to play with him. But this all comes down to the mentality that Steve Eiserman is going to have. Nazem Kadri, like I said, you could make the strongest argument to signing a big contract with Nazem Kadri that you could, more so than any other player, because center depth is the area you need the most. But I still am not sure if that is the right move to make, because I'm still of the belief it's another Band-Aid year. But again, Nazem Kadri is the guy you could make the strongest argument for, and I would be the most okay with throwing some money at, because he's also going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than a guy like Johnny Gaudreau would be. Johnny Gaudreau obviously being a winger, but Gaudreau's going to demand somewhere in the above 10 million, maybe close to 12 million range. You could probably get, in my estimation, this is my speculation, but you could probably get Nazem Kadri under $10 million, because his last contract played him 4.5. So obviously he'll be looking for a pay raise, but $7-8 million range for 5-6 years, I'm not really sure. I'm not an agent, but that is where I have a gut feeling you could probably get him around.
Yeah, I think you're right in the ballpark there. It'll be interesting. And I mean, like I said earlier, there's plenty of other names on this list that are pretty fascinating too.
Well, and we've also talked on end about whether or not these players would want to come to Detroit. I think it'd be tough. It'd be tough just because of where the team's at, trying to get any big name in, but it's not impossible, especially when
Agreed.
Steve Eiserman is your GM. Today's episode is brought to you guys today by BetOnline.net. It is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. And betonline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Segment 2, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. We got, one more probably as far as centers go that is everyone's going to want us to talk about, and that's, of course, Evgeny Mulkin. Much hated in Detroit, I'm sure, still from the 08 and 09 Stanley Cup Finals, but 35 years old, injury prone, was over a point per game in the 41 games he did play this season. I'm sure he's going to be looking for a high AAV, but I'm not sure how long of a contract he's going to get at 35 years old. I'm not sold on Evgeny Malkin. I don't think he really fits where this team is headed, to be honest, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. I think, I
Come
mean,
at me.
we talked about it. You know, we talked about it, just before the break. Like there are some players that fit for both parties, not really there. So yeah, like obviously it'd be cool, but I don't really think that that's something that either party is seriously considering, if considering at all.
Yeah. So do you want to move into some of the more what I would consider realistic names, or is there anyone
Sure.
else you wanted to touch on?
No, I mean, like, what do you consider Forsberg?
I think he's in the same camp as Goudreau. Like, would I be absolutely pumped to see him in a Red Wings uniform? Absolutely. But
For sure.
again, left wing is not a position of. I mean, every position is a position of need on the Red Wings, but you need centers and defense more. I'd be more willing to throw it at a guy again like Kadri, especially because Forsberg is coming off of making $6 million. So you're looking at paying him north at probably 9-10 million. And again, the Red Wings have a ton of cap space, and they have to spend $16 million to get to the cap floor this offseason. And some of that's going to go to the RFAs and some extensions that are going to be made. Well, actually, extensions would come into play once that contract actually ends. But they have to spend probably around $10 million after RFAs. So you could always make an argument for any one individual guy, or you could do the smart thing and shore up, all your defense and center depth issues. So when it comes to the guys like Forsberg and Gaudreau who are wingers, I'd rather spend that on centers and defensemen where the team is really, really struggling.
Yeah, I mean that. I guess. First off, I mean, I think there's a reality where maybe I don't know. Maybe it's
Say
just
it.
because no, like maybe it's just because the Red Wings are just like so weak there. But like I'd throw Forsberg in the middle. Like why? Like why not? I don't care. And at the end of the day, like I don't know. Like I understand that center is the biggest need for sure, but it's not like center is crazy thin, and then the wings are just like oozing with high end talent. Like I guess this is
No,
kind of the Gaudreau argument, just
yeah.
part two. But
You're right. They don't ooze with talent from any position at all, and you have one guy at maybe each spot, each role that is like the guy currently. So your best defenseman is Moritz Seider, your best center is Dylan Larkin, your best right wing is Lucas Raymond, your best left wing is Tyler Bertuzzi, or whatever side they're playing on that given night. Yeah, there you go. And down the rest of the lineup, much room for improvement. But when it comes to value, I value center more than I do wing, because center is a more versatile position. It's a position that is much more needed in the game because they have such a higher defensive responsibility than a winger does as well. So that's why I tend to value centers in this and would rather spend money on centers. That's my own personal philosophy. It's not anything like, again, if they signed Forsberg or they signed Goudreau, I would be pumped to wear the Red Wings uniform, the Red Wings jersey. But I just personally, I just value centers more in this time, in this moment in the rebuild.
Sure. Fair enough.
Speaking of centers that I think would be good fits, again, Nazem Kadri, I'd be down for, but Vincent Trochek of the Carolina Hurricanes, I think is another good option. He's 28 years old. He's coming off a contract that paid him $6.25 million this past season, but it fluctuated a bit every single year. It's 4.75 a cap hit across his entire contract. His last season here with the Carolina Hurricanes, he had 51 points in 81 games played. I think he's a really solid option for the Detroit Red Wings to lock up. I would say longer term and, have a bona fide second line center, slide Q Suter down to third center where he'll probably excel. I think that solves a lot of your center depth without breaking the bank.
Yeah, no, I like that move a lot, and we talked about it a little bit off air before we started too. I think that's a really good, versatile move that can kind of check any box. You know what I mean? Like, oh, if it works out longer term, that's fine. If it doesn't, that's also fine. Like, no matter what, you're kind of crushing it.
When I saw that Vincent Trochek was 28 too, I was like, that can't be right. It feels like he's been in the league for years.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Other guys that you could always look for as well. Ryan Stroma of the New York Rangers. I assume he'll get re-signed, but be on the lookout if he doesn't. He wore the A this past season with the New York Rangers. He had 54 points in 74 games played. He is a solid center who I could absolutely see, center / right wing, who I could absolutely see again fill that second line center, because again, this comes back to my own personal preference, I guess, Scotty, but I just feel like that second line center is such a crucial position the Red Wings need to fill and address as soon as possible, especially when there's actually quite a few solid, second line centers out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, also, just going into next season, think about how nice it would be to have Q Suter be a third line center. Like, that'd
You
be
would kill
awesome.
it there.
Right. Like, that's a great role for him. He can excel. He's talented enough to really excel at that. And I don't think that it would be, like, too big for his britches anymore. I think that would be really ideal for Suter as well, and therefore the team. So I agree with you. I think 2C is one of the more important positions to address.
Well, and then there's also Andrew Kopp. It's really crazy, too. A lot of these guys I'm naming are teams that, made pretty deep runs in the playoffs.
Yeah,
but Andrew Kopp, who was acquired by the Rangers at the trade deadline, 27 years old, can play left wing, right wing, and center. So you can slide in whenever you need him. He had a total of, they have it broken down by team. He had 35 points in 56 games with the Winnipeg Jets and 18 points in 16 games with the New York Rangers, over a point per game. Obviously, playing on a better team with the New York Rangers, his production definitely bumped up because of that. I think the Rangers are going to do everything they can to get him to a long-term extension. But if he doesn't, he'd be a guy I'd be like throwing money at to secure that second line center role on the Detroit Red Wings, because again, I'm beating a dead horse at this point. That is a position of need. It's just a guy. So Vincent Trochek, Andrew Kopp, Ryan Strome are my long-term solutions or longer-term solutions for that second line center role if you want to address it this year and make a step towards competitiveness.
Odds the Detroit Red Wings bring back AA.
Very minimal. I think they have a higher chance.
Yes, you are. I agree with you. It's not going to happen, but the fact that he's still only 27 is crazy to me.
I think they have a higher chance of bringing back these other former Red Wings organizational alums than they do Andreas Athanasiou. I don't have an ad read here, so it's not really.
Oh, I was like, are you gonna do it or?
Yeah. If I had an ad read here, it'd be great. Great segue. But when it comes to short-term solutions, Scotty, I was thinking maybe like a Calle Jarnkrok or Mattias Janmark, both guys that were drafted by the Red Wings.
I love the Mattias one.
Yeah. I think Calle Jarnkrok's 30 and Mattias Janmark is 28. 29 years old.
I think he's 29, yeah.
I think those guys are really good. They don't have to necessarily play 2C, but they shore up the third and fourth line depth at center as well, especially if you decide to let Sam Gagner walk, which I'm still not sold on because I love Sam Gagner.
Yeah, we talked about that, yeah.
They're two guys who have had, established good careers at a depth center role. Calle Jarnkrok especially, didn't finish the season strong with the Calgary Flames after being dealt from the Seattle Kraken, but he's had a solid career, especially in his time with the Nashville Predators, which is who the Red Wings traded him for David Legwand. Remember that? Remember when David
I
Legwand was a Red
do.
Wing?
I
Wore
do remember when
17.
David Legwand was a Red Wing.
Yeah. But 26 points in 49 games played with the Seattle Kraken before being dealt to the Calgary Flames, where he had just 4 points in 17 games played. Career high of just 35 points. So he's about a half point per game player. He really looks like he would solidify that third and fourth line center role, which is still a spot of need. If you're dedicated to Pius Suter being your second line center, you can get Calle, Jarnkrok, or Mattias Janmark, get them back into Detroit Red Wings organization, slide them in there at center, and then bada bing, bada boom, you have Joe Veleno, maybe your fourth line center, and you're good to go.
No, I like that a lot, and those are some names that, again, like we talked about, and that I am very much in approval of. The one of the other ones I wanted to bring up was everybody's favorite trade deadline theory and narrative was, oh, we're gonna trade Vlad and then he's gonna come back.
I thought about that
Now,
today.
now we're here. So now we're talking about forward free agents. What are we actually thinking about that now that it's not, the day of the trade deadline and we're full of emotion?
I mean, I'd be down for it. I'd be 100% down for it. He loved it here. Red Wings fans loved him here. He was pretty productive in a depth forward role, and he showed potential to step up. So I think he'd be open to coming back, and I would hope the Red Wings would be open to coming back because he did just bring tremendous value to the locker room and on the ice. I would 100% want Vladislav Nemesnikov back if he'd be willing to come back.
Do you think he's willing to come back?
I think he would be. He
I think
clearly
he would
loved
be
it
too.
here.
I think
I think he's still going to go wherever the most money is.
for sure. And I think that's what it's going to come back down to, our front office and what kind of money we are legitimately putting at Nemestikov. That's where I think that gets interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I really want. I would love. What did the Red Wings pay him again this past season? Let me double check on that one.
I think, well, there's 3 or 4 different places that have salary projections, but he's around like 2 or 3 most places.
Yeah, they had him. He was only paying him $2 million, and obviously he played much more wing with the Red Wings than he did center. But he was so good in that depth wing role rather, and he would probably. I don't think if you'd get a raise, I don't think it would be much of a raise because his production was around his career pacing. If anything, he would get a raise because of inflation more than anything. So he might get projected like $3 million, but that's still not a lot for a depth winger. That's what he's going to bring, and he's going to be a positive asset in the locker room. I also like Max Domi as an option too. Another guy that's bounced around in a lot of. He kind of screams Steve Eiserman taking a flyer on, kind of like
sure.
Sebastian Aho was for me on defense. Just a guy that, he did find his footing a little bit this past season with Carolina, but he still never really lived up to the hype. Project player, yeah, sure. I could see Steve Eiserman bringing him in.
I'm down with Project, and he's one of the younger dudes in this entire free agent class too.
Yeah. Oh, he really is, and and the more we talk about this, Scotty, though, too, is I'm getting more and more on the you have all this free agents, you have all this salary cap to spend, and you actually have to spend. You have to spend some of it to get to that floor. Like, I'm kind of talking myself into really taking a shot at Nazem Kadri. Is that wild? Is that crazy thought?
I don't think so. I mean, this again, anybody we bring in is going to be able to replace somebody, and it's going to be an improvement. Like, any of these dudes we have named are going to be able to slide in somewhere in lines 1 through 4 and be an improvement over somebody. Like, that's just the reality of the state of the team. So yeah, hell yeah, fire me up. Why not? I think it checks all the boxes.
It does. It does check all the boxes. I get worried about the consistency because this was just his first year of being really, really borderline elite level talent at center role, and I'm just getting a little afraid that, maybe that doesn't pan out. Center / wing role. Because if you commit all that money to him, because you're dedicated to this team taking a real huge step forward, and his production goes back to 50
What's
points.
all that money to you?
It's north of 7 million. That's a
Okay.
lot to play for a guy who's like only scoring 50 points. 50 points ain't bad for a second line center. I don't want to get that twisted, but if you're committing over 7 million to a guy, because that's what he's going to be demanding on the free agent market, you always overpay for free agents.
For sure.
You want him to be able to maintain that level of, production for at least 3 or 4 years into his mid 30s. And that's the only worry. But I kind of, with all this cap space, I do kind of want the Red Wings to go out there and sign a defenseman or sign a center to really take a dedicated big step forward this offseason towards competitiveness. But that again goes back to whatever the philosophy is of the front office on what they want to do this next season with the Connor Bedard draft coming up.
Correct. And I think we've said it a lot, and I'm going to say it again. I think it's possible to do both. I don't think, I think it's possible to bring in a big name person and still be committed to the direction and not really move the needle on where you stand in the rebuild or whatever. People are worried about the draft next year, what pick we're going to have, etc. I think it's very possible to do both. I don't think that's a ridiculous thing to assume or to ask.
I don't think so either, man. It's getting to a very pivotal point in the rebuild where if it's not this
timing is
offseason,
of the essence from now on.
you want to make sure you do it at the right time, but it feels like the time is getting close. And I think a lot of Red Wings fans, myself included, are getting eager to pull that trigger. And I know Steve Eiserman's smarter than most of us average Red Wings fans, where he's going to hold out and be patient as long as possible. You also don't want to miss that opportunity. So it feels like this offseason or next offseason is really going to become that spend heavy or begin to spend heavy. And it's just with a guy like Nazem Kadri in the free agent market this year. And again, if he can maintain that level of production the rest of his career, then you really hit a home run on a signing like that. But again, it's just that risk factor of whether or not he can maintain that level of production. I just really,
sure.
I'm getting eager, man. I'm getting impatient.
I think a lot of people are, and I think that's why this is going to be. I think this has the potential to be the first actual controversial offseason of Steve Eiserman's tenure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the safe picks, the ones that I would still endorse the most, would be like a guy like Vincent Trochek or a guy like Max Domi. Someone who's safe, can carry you for.
Domi makes a lot of sense, man.
Domi makes a lot of stuff, and I think Trochek does if you're looking for a longer term option at second line center. But I still think that in the end, you would still want to improve on that position if you're genuinely trying to become a Stanley Cup contender. There are a couple of wing spots too. I mean, we have only talked about centers really, and a couple of guys who play center and wing. But I do think that there's a case to be made for Andrew Burakovsky and Valeri Nichushkin if either one of those guys leaves the Colorado Avalanche. Valeri Nichushkin, Fresh actually on Twitter posted about it. His stat card is insane. Just 2 years ago with the Dallas Stars, elite defensive statistics, but offensively just could not score a goal. He was awful in the offensive zone and just looked out of place, but elite defensively. But since going to the Colorado Avalanche, he has come alive. I believe his WAR percentile was like 98, 99% since then, because obviously he's scoring at a pretty impressive clip. This season with the Colorado Avalanche, he had 52 points in 62 games, 25 goals. He has 13 points in 16 playoff games so far. But man, in 2018, 2019 with the Dallas Stars, he had 0 goals, 10 assists for 10 points in 57 games. He was a non-factor that season with the Stars. But ever since going to Colorado, every year has been an improvement. And this year, a lot like Nazem Kadri, he has exploded. And so if you're looking to shore up your wingers, Valeri Nichushkin is going to be looking for a payday, but he's only 27 years old, and you have a lot of cap space to spend. And I know I with Filip, Forsberg, and Gaudreau, I was kind of hesitant, but Valeri Nichushkin, while looking for a payday, is going to command a lot less in the free agent market than Filip Forsberg, than Johnny Gaudreau. So if you want to get a genuine bona fide top 2 winger, that's not going to cost you a ton. I think Valeri Nichushkin is a pretty solid option at that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think with that, it's going to be really interesting to see how the market develops after when re-signing and once these two teams are done and everything. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of players from teams that went really deep into the postseason, if not the Cup, that have the potential to be on the market or not on the market, and depending on how the market shapes up, that will determine a lot of the salary too.
Yeah, I'm again, it just goes back to Scotty. I'm really excited and a little bit nervous about this offseason because it's just about staying patient and just trusting in what Eiserman's going to do. I'm trying to continue to use my better judgment and align myself with what I think Eiserman's going to do, but none of us truly know what Eiserman's going to do because he holds it so close to the chest. And
Correct.
so, like, the eager fan in me is like, yes, go get Gaudreau, go get Nazem Kadri, spend all the cap. But the other, like, the patient side of me is like, come on, there's a method to the rebuild. Stay calm, Brian. Like,
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everybody at this point.
it's such a pivotal moment in this rebuild, this offseason and next offseason.
Absolutely.
So excited.
Timing is vital.
But I mean, you've heard what I want, Scotty, out of these forwards. Are there any particular forwards that you're sold on you before you sign off that you just absolutely want? I feel like I've just been doing one-sided rambling this entire 30 minutes.
No, I think I let you go because I think our lists were pretty similar. I think that, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we went on air too about who we wanted to like go over, and I think most of those lined up, and that's why it ended up being that way. But I really think Domi makes a lot of sense, man. I think that's the big one that I like have circled, right? I think that makes a ton of sense if he A, hits the market, and B, is in Steve's eyesight.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing too is consider what players are going to even hit the market. I think Max Domi
Exactly.
is pretty much a guaranteed to hit the market. I think Nishkinen and Kadri are pretty much guarantees at the market, especially with
Yeah,
the
Kadri for
McKinnon
sure.
extension coming up.
Yeah,
So I think those guys are really guys to look at, and they all serve a different purpose for the Red Wings. I mean, Nishkinen and Kadri would be a huge step forward to taking the rebuild seriously and trying to be competitive next year. And Max Domi would be more of like a stay in the course, stay patient type signing.
for
So I
sure.
think there's a lot of really interesting forwards to keep an eye on, and whatever Steve Eiserman's going to really tell the tale of what the next season is going to hold.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Pull it up the read here. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Scotty and I will be back with you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place. Your team every day.
Every day.